One of Prime Minister Modi's most aggressive speeches to date. It has lasted well over an hour. The Prime Minister, in a direct series of attacks on Rahul Gandhi and the Congress leadership, has called them the leaders of the Tukde-Tukde gang, those who want to divide and rule India. He has pointed a finger directly at the Congress party and said that they have gotten used to losing, but they have not lost any of their arrogance, and that the Congress will be out of power for the next 100 years. India Today's Mosmi Singh live with me. Mosmi, very much in keeping with election season, this was vintage Modi in the Lok Sabha. You know, a speech that has lasted in excess of an hour, has been, very, very sharply pointed at the Congress party. Not surprising given Rahul Gandhi's speech last week.
Absolutely. If you see, Shiv, that the entire, even as the Prime Minister teared down the opposition, it was largely and mostly the Congress, and in turn mentioning Nehru, mentioning the slogan of Indira Gandhi, and repeatedly attacking Rahul Gandhi, taking down his speech point by point, rebutting to the extent of saying that such statements were made by one of the leaders who was talking about industrialists and calling them a double variant, which is more deadly than the coronavirus. So the Prime Minister, in fact, didn't leave any attack of Rahul Gandhi countered. A very, very aggressive political attack by the Prime Minister. Yeah. He quoted Nehru twice, talking about how what Nehru believed in, and in fact, taking a dig at the Congress that you've forgotten what Nehru said. Shiv, that is clearly, a tit for tat and a very, very attacking Prime Minister in the House.
He's basically, talked about every single one of the attacks that Rahul Gandhi mounted on him last week. He has said that the Congress wished him misery during COVID, that the Congress basically has tried to score brownie points by abusing India's big businesses. This was very much election mode Narendra Modi that you've seen for the last 90 minutes, viewer. Let me just play out for you what Rahul Gandhi said and how the Prime Minister appears to have countered him. Here's exactly how the face-off has played out between last week with Rahul and Modi now.
दो हिंदुस्तान बन रहे हैं, एक अमीरों का हिंदुस्तान और दूसरा गरीबों का हिंदुस्तान, और इन दो हिंदुस्तानों के बीच में खाई बढ़ती जा रही है।
मुझे कभी कभी माननीय अध्यक्ष जी ये विचार आता है, उनके बयानों से, उनके कार्यक्रमों से, उनके कर्तृत्व से, जिस प्रकार से आप बोलते हैं, जिस प्रकार से मुद्दों से जुड़ते हैं, ऐसा लगता है कि आपने मन बना लिया है कि 100 साल तक सत्ता में नहीं आना है।
Mosmi, the Prime Minister was always expected to counter, Rahul Gandhi with, in his speech today. But I don't think anyone was prepared for how many different kinds of attacks he mounted in this counter. He went ahead and said, talked about their ahankar and how their ahankar has been allowed to, prevail because of the so-called ecosystem. These are words one hears on social media. Tukde-Tukde gang is another word that the Prime Minister used as well. These are words one sees on Twitter. The Prime Minister employing them in the House today. Interesting.
Absolutely, Shiv. You hit the nail on the head. These are hashtag words that the Congress has often used, or the social media has often used. And importantly, as you said, attacking Rahul Gandhi for his speech is another thing. But the Prime Minister went to the extent of explaining why Rahul Gandhi was doing so. He did mention that how the Congress was stuck before the 2014. He quoted Chidambaram as saying that how Chidambaram said that people don't mind paying 15 rupees for a mineral water bottle, but have a problem with 1 rupee hike in wheat prices. He went on to quote, the first Prime Minister of India, Pandit Nehru, and saying that how, the Congress has forgotten its duty. He also quoted, Rahul Gandhi saying that during the pandemic, the Congress distributed tickets to migrant workers and in turn instigated the workers to go back and spread the pandemic. So accusing the Congress that it was instrumental in spreading the pandemic in the first wave. Now this is a counter-attack because remember the COVID pandemic is one political issue that the Congress is cornering Prime Minister Narendra Modi on. So you can think of host of issues that the Prime Minister did mention, and that's why I say that it was a very, very well planned, a scathing attack and a carpet bombing of sorts that we saw from the Prime Minister. He was, his oratory skills are well known. He was his attacking best, and there were moments of lighter moments that were exchanged. Every time Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary would stand, the Prime Minister would sit down. He was taking his time, and in fact, he was re-emphasizing and reading out the quotes that Jawaharlal Nehru had said earlier. So again and again, even if there were interruptions, the Prime Minister apparently had made it clear that he will make his pointed attack very, very slowly and move in very slowly and register his point as far as the president's address.
And he took his time. And he took his time. It wasn't even a short speech. It was a long series of attacks. We've got our first reactions coming in from the Congress party. Supriya Srinath, senior leader, spokesperson of the Congress party, is with us. Supriya, welcome. Your first reactions to the Prime Minister's speech. He's made very targeted attacks at your party, called you the leaders of the Tukde-Tukde gang, talked about Ahankar and the ecosystem, many different attacks. Your response, Supriya?
So first and foremost, I hope I won't be interrupted because we heard the Prime Minister for almost an hour and a half, and I would want to comment on just one thing to begin with. I feel very, very sorry for the fact that this is the language that the Prime Minister chooses to speak in when he speaks in Parliament in the House. He's addressing elected members of Parliament. He's not doing a petty petulant election rally, but I don't think Mr. Modi knows the difference. The first comment that you pointed out, because the Foreign Minister, Home Minister Amit Shah has in writing given to the House that there is no such gang. The existence of such a gang is known. Prime Minister talking about what sort of language is he speaking in? Point number one. Point number two, I am very glad that he has done such great research on Nehru because he quoted him 6 times. I hope he learned something from Nehru. I hope he learned Nehru's secularism, his faith in science and technology and democracy. And I'm sure the Prime Minister will keep his eyes and ears open when he reads Nehru. The third thing, he said Pradgati. आपकी प्राणगति तो राहुल गांधी है. अगर राहुल गांधी ने पार्लियामेंट में बोला नहीं होता तो आपके पास तो आज कुछ बोलने को ही नहीं था, because all your attack was personal against Rahul Gandhi and against the Congress party. The Prime Minister spoke about 2 very startling things. He spoke about the farmers in this country. The same man who had mowed down farmers in Lakhimpur was sitting in that very house as India's state home minister. Mr. Modi has no moral compass or moral authority to speak about farmers when he could not even say one word of reverence for the 700 farmers who've lost their lives. And last but not the least, I really want to remind Mr. Modi, he invokes Mahatma Gandhi, and there is a section of people that he follows, a section of people his party worships. They keep saying good faith in the bar. Mr. Modi does not break his silence. He does not say a word when Gandhi is attacked verbally and otherwise. And today he wants to talk about Mahatma Gandhi. He wants to talk about the migrant laborers, the same migrant laborers who you gave 4 hours notice and let them languish and die. The same migrant laborers who had to walk in the heat to back to their homes. The same migrant labor for whom you lied in the Supreme Court saying there is not a single person on the street. And the last thing that I want to say is double variant ka current to actually Modi ji ko laga hai. In income inequality, 20% of India, 15 crore households have seen their incomes erode by half. Not a word on that. Not a word on the growing income inequality, the growing disparity between the rich and the poor. That is where Mr. Modi lacks moral courage to talk about the poor. He can keep breaking up the past. He can keep quoting things. He can keep doing the drama. He can keep speaking the language. But the young and the farmers And of course, women in this country were looking at the speech, which was nothing but hogwash, and may I say, very, very unbecoming of a prime minister to use the language that he does.
Okay,
Either sack your home minister for lying in the house, or apologize to the house for speaking the language which you did.
Supriya, I don't want to touch too much on the personal stuff. You've talked about it, but the prime minister did target Rahul Gandhi specifically about many of the things he said. He also called him someone who runs away.
Well, the same prime minister, when the leader spoke in parliament, the same prime minister was not present. What do you mean runs away? Rahul Gandhi has asked you tough questions on poverty. He has asked you on employment. He has asked you questions on why are you increasing trade with China. We are actually fighting with them on the border. We have asked you why does China continue to occupy space within our territory. He has asked you questions on farmers. He has asked you questions on income inequality. Why are you not run away? Rahul Gandhi is the one who put you in the dock and has asked you direct questions for which you have no answers, and you have to resort to cheap theatrics.
Okay, that's the first reaction from the Congress party. Supriya Srinath here on India Today saying that this was an extremely personal attack unbecoming of Parliament. She's also said that the Prime Minister has no right to call Rahul a runaway. Supriya, thanks very much for being with us here. That first reaction, as always, here on India Today. Rahul Gandhi's speech last week, had echoed across the political landscape as well, especially through the media and social media. The Prime Minister's speech will no doubt be doing the same as we speak. Many of the things that he said, the metaphors, the word choice, the choice of words that the Prime Minister employed in this counterattack on the opposition, specifically the Congress and Rahul Gandhi, is going to be something that we're going to see trending and become a big primetime talking point. I want to play out for you some of the highlights once again. If you missed it, here are a couple of the chunks that are already buzzing all over the place. Take a look at what the Prime Minister said in this attack.
अगर आप जमीन से जुड़े हुए होते, अगर आप जनता के बीच में रहते होते, तो जरूर ये चीजें नजर आती, दिखाई देता। लेकिन दुर्भाग्य ये है कि आप में से बहुत लोग ऐसे हैं जिनके सुई कांटा 2014 में अटका हुआ है और उससे वो बाहर ही निकल नहीं पाते हैं और उसका नतीजा भी आपको भुगतना पड़ा है। आपने जो अपने आप को एक ऐसी मानसिक अवस्था में बांध के रखा है, देश की जनता आपको पहचान गई है। कुछ लोग पहले पहचान गए, कुछ लोग देर से पहचान रहे और कुछ लोग आने वाले समय में पहचानने वाले हैं। अब देखिए, आप जब इतना सारा लंबा उपदेश देते हैं तब भूल जाते हैं 50 साल तक कभी आपने भी देश में यहां बैठने का सौभाग्य प्राप्त किया था। तेलंगाना बनाने का श्रेय लेते हैं, लेकिन तेलंगाना बनने के बाद भी वहां की जनता ने आपको स्वीकार नहीं किया। झारखंड का जन्म हुआ, 20 साल हो गए, पूर्ण रूप से कांग्रेस को स्वीकारते नहीं है, पिछले दरवाजे से वो घुसने का प्रयास करते हैं। माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, सवाल चुनाव नतीजों का नहीं है, सवाल उन लोगों की नीयत का है, उनकी नेक दिली का है कि इतने बड़े लोकतंत्र में इतने साल तक शासन में रहने के बाद देश की जनता हमेशा हमेशा के लिए उनको क्यों नकार रही है। और जहां भी ठीक से लोगों ने राह पकड़ ली, दोबारा आपको प्रवेश करने नहीं दिया है। इतना सारा होने के बावजूद भी हम तो एक चुनाव हार जाए ना, महीनों तक न जाने इकोसिस्टम क्या क्या करती है। इतना सारा पराजय होने के बावजूद भी ना आपका अहंकार जाता है, न आपकी इकोसिस्टम आपके अहंकार को जाने देती है।